we're going to go, we'll start with strategies. That's how I always start my classes, because if you do not know how the questions are organized and what to look for, that's when it seems like all the options are correct. So real quick, if you're doing any of these exams, it's good to take 3 to 4 months to study, especially if like you've never done HR in terms of a generalist role whereby you've done all the different areas. Then the key thing is to practice as well. Just like you study the study guides, you have to practice as you go. And that's one of my winning strategies, making sure people take many, many practice questions till they get how the questions are organized and they're able to pass. So think positive, speak positive, act positive. I always tell people, don't ever say you're not going to pass. I'm a terrible test taker. I know you have to start speaking it and saying that you will pass this exam, because you can do it. Now, do not overwhelm yourself with too many study resources. Some people have like 6 resources and all of that. Just have, like I said, the study guide by Sandra Reed, that's a very good one. That's the one I use to pass. It's been updated now, but it's still a very good option. And then the practice questions will be supplied by me. That's why you guys were signed up on Teachable. That's why I have all the assignments, all the practice exams, and you also have the class marker. So did anyone take the exams from the links that I sent through the first email? But as we progress, it becomes easier, things make more sense. And so don't worry, don't let it pressure you or scare you at all. All right, so read like you teach the material. So this really works. Once you're teaching something, it's almost like you're having to draw out what you yourself have had to read, and it helps you to retain that information. So if you're going for the exam, arrive early. If you're taking it over the internet, take about 30 minutes to get yourself together, make sure you're already there and you're settled. All right, so there is a clock. That's why I have the class marker option. So you have a timed exam, and that would help you to know how much time you need, how much time you're taking for each question. So be mindful of that. But the more you prepare, I find that you're able to go through the questions quicker. All right, so if you see a tough question, someone asks a question. No? All right, so if you see a tough question, did someone say something? Yes, no, okay. And if you see a tough question, you can always there's something where you can click on and say, I'll come back to that. Read the entire question carefully. Just like Amy was saying, you have to read word for word. And this is key for today. We're going to start seeing how you can check for keywords that help you to be able to find the right answer in the options. So don't skip read. This is not an exam for that. Don't speed read. You have to read carefully. Don't be distracted. Answer by elimination. And this is where I think it was Lakshmi that talked about that. You might see 2 options that are correct. So you've already eliminated the other 2. And from those 2, the more you check for the keywords, the better you're able to determine the right answer. So you don't need to remember the date. Some people say, oh, when is the Title VII, 1964? You don't have to remember all of that. You just need to know what those laws say, their requirements, and how they apply to HR. So yeah, read your study guide, but focus more on practice questions, because the exam itself, it's practice questions. So it just makes sense to begin to do that from the get-go. So you will have situations, scenarios. The study guide will give you the definitions, what this means, but in the questions, you start seeing how that plays out in terms of scenarios. Then you want to think strategically. So strategy is key for this exam. HRCI as well as SHRM, if you intend to take their exam as well, they want HR to be seen as being strategic. Now, strategy in this sense is making decisions that impact the entire organization. So it's not just the HR department or productions department. Strategy impacts the entire organization. It's high level, meaning that it's done usually by the executives. It looks into the future of the organization. So what are we going to do in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years? And that's why it's also long term. Then what happens is when the organization strategy is done, it's then cascaded down to the other departments and business units and work teams, and they then take their objectives and tactics and all of that from the overall strategy. So HR has to think strategically for this exam, doing things that help the organization to achieve its overall goal, that helps the organization to think future, that helps the organization to think long-term, the bottom line, the financials, the metrics, measurements. Those are very key for this exam. All right, so find the keyword in every question. We'll talk about that when we start looking at questions. Focus on the evidence presented in the question. So don't assume and don't say, oh, well, this may be what we practice in my organization. That may not apply here. What really you need to focus on is the evidence that question is giving you. Now, needs analysis, it's usually the correct answer when you see what's the first step. So the first step is usually, what do we need? Have we identified what we need? If we say HR wants to recruit people, we first need to identify, what do we need? Where do we need those people? Do we need those people in production? Do we need them in marketing? Do we need to outsource? What exactly do we need? If we don't know what we need, how do we know what else we're going to do? So whenever you see questions that say, what's the first step? It's the needs analysis, or identifying some kind of need, or identifying exactly the issues at hand that we need to know before we then start looking for solutions or saying, oh, let's just do this. No, we first need to know exactly what is the problem. All right, top management commitment, that's usually the answer where you see what's the most important step. Because HR has been accused many times of working in silos, doing their own thing, just thinking their own thoughts and implementing what they want. But HRCI wants you to see HR as in collaboration, yes, with the top management. So you need to make sure that top management commitment is gotten for everything HR wants to do. That is also the way HR is being strategic. Because when top management says, yes, that's what we need, yes, this is something that is going to help us to achieve our competitive advantage, to achieve our profits, things like that, that's really important for HR to do. Then HR alignment with corporate strategy is also key. HR has to align with what the corporate strategy is. Businesses exist to make a profit, watching the bottom line. So HR also has to be careful about their financials. If HR is saying we need to spend $100,000 on this, they need to be able to back that up with what is called a business case, or having some metrics to show that this cost for hiring these people, this is what we're going to get in terms of the return on this investment. So it's not enough for HR to say, oh, we just need these people. What's the return on the investment? How does it impact the bottom line? If we're going to commit this money to buy talent or to borrow talent, how much is that going to get us back? Can you put that in metrics? Can you put that in figures where we can see? Then a company's most valuable assets are its people. So HR also has to advocate for people. Employee turnover is not good for these exams. You don't want to pick options that say fire people arbitrarily. Now, if the person did something like sexual harassment or violence, then yeah, but you still want to make sure you keep that in mind, that the most valuable assets are the people, and you do not want to pick options that just say, let this person go, fire this person. Now, communication as well, very important for HR to succeed. So if HR is doing anything, they're trying to implement whatever, communicating that to the people, to the leadership, it's very key. So that's also a way to know which is the right answer when you see things like changes that happen in the organization, mergers, acquisitions, laying people off. Communication has to happen before, during, and after. Can everyone still hear me? Is everyone still good?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, employee participation is key. HR, again, cannot do things in silos and just say, this is what we are doing. We know what we are doing. You have to let the employees participate. They have to be involved. They must know exactly what HR is doing, or else you're going to get backlash, or you're going to get people that will say no. You're going to get resistance. And those initiatives would not work. And it was all because you didn't allow them to participate in what actually concerns them. So that's also another tip. Now it says, remember to read through each situation to determine which is the higher priority. So when you see things like, oh, this is good for the employee, this is good for the organization, I will say pick the option that is best for the organization's strategy. Because at the end of the day, when priorities are lined up, what is best for the organization is the reason why HR is there. And that's what I want you to see when you see those questions, or that's what I want you to pick when you look through these questions. So do a needs analysis. We said that's the first step. Identify your priorities, make decisions, solve problems. Most important step is getting top management support. All right, so practice questions, we talked about that. Top management, we talked about that. Ensure that HR is in sync with the business so that they are actually being strategic business partners. Now, know the difference between what is effective, it means that you achieve the goal, and what is efficient, it means that you use the resources you had wisely. So in terms of time, the cost, the people, you were able to manage resources. Someone can be effective but not efficient. Someone can be efficient but not effective. All right, so HR is to be involved in creating and setting corporate directives. So HRCI, again, wants HR to have a seat at the table, the corporate table, to be able to add information about people to what the business strategy is going to be. So again, align everything towards achieving the business objectives. HR does not exist in a vacuum. It must be seen to add tangible value to the organization's strategic objectives. All right, let's go real quick. Understand the business plan. So the business would have a business plan and say, this is what we want to do, want to expand, want to make profit, want to do all this. HR needs to have business acumen to be able to know exactly what this means. So in the questions we're going to deal with today, you would see things like balance sheet, things like income statement. It's because HRCI wants HR professionals to know business terms, financial terms. That way that you can be the better strategic partner rather than like just off of your head, you do not know what those business terms are when it's being discussed on the strategic table. So you will see a lot of questions, especially today that we're dealing with business management. There will be a lot of questions that have to do with business strategy and things like that. All right, clearly illustrate to management that HR practices have a ROI, that's return on investment. So we kind of talked about that already. HR must ensure that talent is effectively placed, motivated, capable, and retained. You also may not be practicing what is seen as best practice in your organization, because I would have a lot of my clients say, oh, but Ola, that's not the way we do it in my company or in my organization. Just forget that for now and try and let's focus on exactly how this curriculum works so you can get your certification, because every company has their own peculiarities. But for this exam, they're just saying, this is the best practice, this is what we want you to know, and this is what will get you the right answer. So talent must provide a strategic advantage for the organization. HR must support the overall business model. Now, organizational success, when HR says we have contributed to the organization's success, it must be measurable. It's not enough to just say it, you have to show it. So in terms of metrics, in terms of, like we said, ROI, return on investment, cost benefit analysis, making a business case, cost per hire, time for hire, all those things are important for these exams. Business justification as well. Organizations are looking at improving their efficiency. So things like managing resources, managing people's performance, very key. Performance, productivity, profits, 3 Ps that HR should focus on: move the corporate mission forward, work within the budgetary guidelines, ensure all HR roads lead to a solid business result. HR actively contribute to the business plan. Again, people are the most important strategic asset. So that's making sure you tailor your answers to that. Termination is rarely the correct answer, but you could train people, you could put them on a PIP, performance improvement plan, discipline. But again, if it's something the person did that is totally off, like violence or theft or sexual violence, sexual harassment, those are cases where termination is a good answer. Loss of talent should be avoided as much as possible. Effective communication strategies, especially questions that have to do with change. There's going to be a merger. We're merging two companies together. There's going to be an acquisition. We are the bigger company acquiring a smaller company. Communication is key for any type of change happening. Employee involvement, also very important, making sure employees participate, you get their feedback, surveys, focus groups, things like that. All right, questions that ask how to improve efficiency, effectiveness, productivity, motivation. It usually involves employee involvement. And lastly, be positive.